Joining me now is academic and author Ralph Schoellhammer, also columnist at the Brussels Signal. Ralph, the president of France's National Rally Party, which is soaring in the polls, has slammed the comments of star soccer player Kylian Mbappe, who has urged voters not to back what he calls far-right parties in the snap parliamentary elections called by Emmanuel Macron. He is one of more than 200 French athletes and celebrities who have signed an open letter telling voters to reject the far right. Jordan Bardella has said, "I'm a little embarrassed to see these athletes give lessons to people who can no longer make ends meet, who no longer feel safe, who do not have the chance to live in the neighbourhoods overprotected by security agents." What do you make of this intervention by a soccer superstar and all those other celebrities? Will it have any sort of an impact on the French public?
Well, you put me in a very uncomfortable position here because the Austrian team lost against Mbappé's team just a couple of hours ago. So clearly I'm biased against the French soccer players, regardless of what they say. No, but I think you're absolutely right in analysis. I mean, I take it like the Romans. Like the Romans didn't care about the political views of their actors and their gladiators, and basically celebrities and athletes are modern day actors and gladiators. And we shouldn't care too much about what they say. The National Rally at the European parliamentary elections, they won 93% of all the electoral districts in France. And that tells you where the French public stands. With the exception of Paris, basically, they are ruling the land already when it comes to polls as well. We'll see if they can pull the same thing off on June 3rd and July 7th with the parliamentary elections. But it doesn't matter to people anymore. Most people are annoyed by this. I think people can distinguish between I like soccer and I like to make ends meet. And these things very often do not overlap. We see it, by the way, also in the United States. People still like Hollywood actors, but when Joe Biden mingles with these celebrities and gets the endorsement of Julia Roberts, George Clooney, and Robert De Niro, nobody sits at home and says, "Oh my God, Robert De Niro says I have to vote for Joe Biden. I immediately change all my opinions." This is an illusion that many politicians have because they are very often caught in their own kind of, celebrity obsession that most people don't have.
I think you're right. We saw it right here in Australia with the Voice referendum, where we had the sporting stars, the celebrities, all the big corporates, all of them backing the yes side, and it was trounced quite comprehensively in the national vote. Now, the leader of France's National Rally Party, Marine Le Pen, is being credited as the force behind the once French party now standing on the brink of power after they made enormous gains in the EU elections. President Emmanuel Macron was spooked into calling a snap election. Was that a massive miscalculation on his part, Ralph?
Yes, I think so. And if you look at Macron's career so far, I think he has calculated quite a bit over the last 7 years that he's been in office. There's this weird idea. There are headlines in The Economist and the Financial Times. So this is a 4D chess move by Macron and another brilliant strategy by Macron. I mean, I just want to remind everyone, Macron started as a popular politician and is now a very unpopular politician. So I don't really get where all his supposed brilliant moves are coming from. This is, again, a delusion that the media continues to tell us. It's a little bit like with Joe Biden when they say, sure, he seems frail and out of it in public, but behind closed doors, he's like sharp and super smart. No, Macron is exactly how you see him. He's he's not, let's put it this way, he knows how to present himself. Like visually, he's very appealing, but as a politician, I would say he's kind of moved from one blunder to the next. None of his reform projects, from the pension to the Ukraine policy, he was capable of taking the French people with him, and that's one of the most important things. And Le Pen, for her part, like Meloni, I have to admit, the face of the European right, or the competent European right, seems to be female. I'm deeply impressed both with the way in which she changed the National Rally, which once was the Front National of her father, who was in many ways a neo-Nazi. I think that's not an exaggeration. She really made it, on the one hand, a respectable party, but I think she still stuck to the issues that are important for the people and that make it a right-wing party, like on immigration. And we see the same in Italy with Meloni. I mean, just as a reminder, right? Remember when Meloni was voted into office, she's a fascist and she will lead Italy over a cliff. Yes. And, what's going to happen? The catastrophe is upon us. And now remember just a couple of weeks ago, a few days actually successfully ago. The G7 meeting, I mean, the G7 meeting basically was like an episode out of The Walking Dead, with one exception, which was Giorgia Meloni. Macron on his last legs, right? Justin Trudeau. But with Joe Biden, it's not just metaphorically, it's almost literally The Walking Dead. And pretty much every politician, with the exception of Meloni, is deeply unpopular in their own country, except her. Of all the European politicians that actually won during the European elections, Meloni was the only incumbent who could gain votes and was not an opposition party. She's doing a great job. I know she's often criticized from the right that she's not moving fast enough and far enough, but I think she's playing a long game just as Le Pen did. I think they are doing something that's very shrewd, and I wish them all the best.
And you were 100% right about the way the media misrepresented her when she first came to power. She was called a fascist, far right, a danger to democracy. So much hyperbole around her election, and she has emerged as you've explained, one of the strongest and most popular leaders now. And I was also interested in how she greeted the different world leaders. She's not shy about expressing how she feels about them, whether she likes them, like if it's the Argentinian leader, Javier Milei, she's obviously a fan, the Indian leader. And then when she was seeing some of the politicians she wasn't fond of, she could not hide her disdain. Clearly, Meloni is not an enormous fan of Brazil there, as you can see. And I think she saved her greatest disdain for Emmanuel Macron. She has had ongoing issues with him. But she's going to have the final laugh, Ralph, because Macron is in all sorts of trouble, as are many leaders she greeted during the G7. But she's likely to be there for some time.
I hope so. And one has to say, right, this is Italy. Italy has been a notoriously difficult country to govern, and they never or barely ever had a government making it through the entire legislative period without having it crumble or collapse. And she's doing a fantastic job, right? She's in a coalition government. So this is always what I tell the critics of her. I say, you think she's she's not like the American president. Like, she has to keep a coalition together and to govern. So this is very difficult. And as you correctly pointed out, she distinguishes, I think, very well on the global stage which world leaders are pro-Western and which leaders are not, which is why she gets along well with Milei,
Yes.
and which is why she's critical of Lula, for example. And the absurdity that we have in Western politics, right, where we admire somebody like Lula, who is absolutely anti-Western in his outlook, but we criticize somebody like Milei, who wants to be a pro-Western politician, is completely absurd. So this kind of self-hate that we see in Western societies as well, for example, with the pro-Palestine demonstrations, also has infected higher politics. That is a major issue. And I think she understands it. I think that Le Pen understands it in a way that Macron or Sunak simply do not grasp what's going on there.
Now, going back to France, there was a march against the far right, as the left call it. It took place in Paris over the weekend, but it seemed to be more like a march against France, against the West, Western civilization. There wasn't too many French flags I can see there, but plenty of Palestinian flags, kafirs and signs calling for intifada. Ralph, this was like a commercial for the national rally. I think they'd be quite happy to see this sort of footage going around the world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that ultimately this could also help her, because there is a growing impression, also I believe in the United States, and I think also partially in Australia, that the left tends to be for everything that's not the West. It doesn't matter what the idea is. And I think you see this if you take a closer look, right? Its green policies are anti-civilizational policies. You see the pro-Palestinian stance and anti-Israel stance is basically an anti-Western, anti-civilizational stance. And you see this in all these areas. And I think that gradually people are waking up to this, right? Originally, they really thought that the left is concerned with the cause, right? The environment, the plight of the Palestinians, the plight of migrants. But the closer you look, these are just projections. What they're really interested in is to always take the position that whatever is against the West is the side they are with. And the argument, of course, as many have explained on your show, that's the essence of wokeness, right? It's always the oppressor versus the oppressed, and there is not a single scenario in which the West is not the oppressor. So whoever is on the other side, even if it's Hamas, right, they must be the good guys. And I mean, first of all, I think it's wrong. And I'm glad to see that more and more people wake up to this. And I just fear, this is always the biggest fear, that once again the media will accomplish to blackmail people not voting into parties that take a pro-Western stance. So this is the only fear I have, because as you correctly pointed out originally, right, they're already jumping in this hyper gear, also in the United States, also in Australia. It's the far right, it's the radical right, it's the extreme right. But if you look at their positions are the same positions that a common sense person is having today or would have had 30 years ago. I mean, Le Pen basically sounds like de Gaulle. Farage pretty much sounds like well, he talks differently, but his positions are basically Churchill's positions. So none of this is completely out of the extraordinary, but we have moved the cultural and academic institutions so far to the left that everything for them seems to be the far right. And the media, unfortunately, is part of that viewpoint. So they think that everybody who's just slightly right of the Greens must be a radical right-winger. And it's very, very difficult to fight against this.
You're right. It's the media. It's a big part of the problem, and also that institutional power that has been corrupted by the left. It started in academia, but it's gone much deeper than that. Ralph Schoellhammer, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thanks for having me.